After a Tinder romance turned out to be the most infamous scam of the digital age, one woman turned her heartbreak into purpose. This is the Cecilie Fjellhoy story.
Wow.
Hey.
Hi.
You know this story? Does this sound familiar to you?
Oh, I do. I think I watched a documentary.
I was going to
about
say,
this.
I'm assuming you've watched the documentary, and I'm assuming most of our listeners have, because according to Netflix, it was watched for over 167 million hours globally in its first 28 days.
Get out. This is the Tinder Swindler, right?
Yeah, it's one of their biggest documentaries to date.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. And so I watch it. So usually we find our cases quite differently. Usually I read a book. Usually you watch a documentary. But if you recall, I was home and like the kids weren't here and I was like, what should I watch? And I'm like, I'm going to do what Meghan does. I'm going to watch a documentary and then do an episode. And I've always heard about this case. And I was like, you know what? Let's do something a little lighter. Every now and then it's nice to not cover something gruesome. Such as a murder or a sexual crime.
Right. I mean, this case I wouldn't describe it as light, but lighter than murder for sure.
Yes, lighter. Of course, there's still victims and there's still pain and trauma, but it's a different type. And the day this comes out, guess what tomorrow is?
The day this comes out. It's not Valentine's Day. We're not that far ahead.
No,
What?
our live event will be tomorrow.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh, wow. I'm so excited for that.
If you are interested, you could go to Eventbrite and look up Women&Crime podcast. We will be having a live event at Fairleigh Dickinson in Madison, New Jersey. We'll be doing a panel discussion. Well, it's a live podcast / panel discussion with women that have served time at the infamous Edna Mann facility in New Jersey. So check out our social media, check out Eventbrite for more details on that event. And I'm super excited.
Me too.
So let's go ahead and meet Cecile. So I want to also say I'm going to apologize in advance for some of my pronunciation. I've seen her name pronounced Cecilie, Cecilia, and Cecile. So I'm going to say Cecile. Yes, I've tried really hard because I think it depends on what language you're saying it in. So Cecilie is the pretty way to say it. Has a nice roll of the tongue. I don't have that ability, but I'm going to do my best.
That's not true. You have the ability. But I think it's good. Like I read something recently, like, please learn pronunciation. I'm like, we try so hard.
I know we do. We can't be perfect. And well, let's hold that till the end because we'll talk about reviews later on. Okay.
Oh, no. Okay.
My favorite.
No.
Okay. Unfortunately, there's not much background on Cecilie. Through sources, though, everyone agrees that she was born in May of 1995. And she grew up in a small town outside of Oslo, Norway.
Oh.
As an adult, she worked as a user experience designer in the IT industry for almost 10 years. And her expertise was in digital identity and banking systems.
Oh, wow.
I don't even understand what that means, but it sounds really important.
I couldn't do it.
In late 2017, at the age of 29, she left Norway and began graduate school in London. And it was here that she worked part-time and she took classes along with acclimating to a brand new culture. How fun. I always wanted to do that in my 20s or 30s, like just pick up and move to a foreign country.
Yeah.
Probably because of graduate school. You know, that kind of took up a big block of our young adulthood. It never happened for me.
Me either.
There's still time.
Well, we travel now, so.
Yeah, that's true. But I was talking about actually like living in a foreign country.
That would be great.
Yeah. By January of 2018, she was feeling alone and wanted to meet some new people in her area. So she did what a lot of people do these days, and she went online. Now, she'd had some good luck meeting previous boyfriends on the app Tinder back in Oslo. So she decided she would get back on the app and start swiping in London to see if she could meet someone.
Right.
And one evening, she matched with a man named Simon. Now, from his photos, he seemed like a good-looking man, and he appeared to be extremely wealthy. Do you recall these images?
Yes. Was one of them on a plane?
Oh, my God. I mean, several depicted him in expensive cars, wearing designer clothes. I mean, I'm not talking about like a BMW type of expensive car. Like, I don't even know like what they're called. Maybe like Lamborghinis or something. Like they're really
I don't know.
expensive cars. They showed him on yachts. They showed him, traveling on private jets. Somebody who was clearly, someone who clearly had means. Now, after the two matched, they started chatting on WhatsApp. And I think that's pretty common because I guess they were international, so it was easier than texting, or maybe people want to keep their privacy, so they go to WhatsApp instead of giving out their phone numbers. So the two started chatting, and he informed her that he was in London for meetings, and he was available the next day before he'd be flying out again. But if she was available, he would love to meet. And it turned out she was available. So the two met for coffee at the Four Seasons Hotel. For those of you who don't know, this is a very lavish hotel. She describes waiting for him in the lobby and kind of the elevator doors opening up and this attractive man, in this beautiful hotel, dressed to the nines, walks out of the elevator. And she was pretty smitten. Her first impression of him was a good impression. And as they got to know each other over coffee, she became even more interested in him. Now, so who was this man, Simon? Well, according to Simon, he told Cecilie that his father was Leviev, a billionaire Israeli diamond mogul. Now, Lev was known as the king of diamonds. Therefore, Simon was the prince of diamonds because Simon says he was his son. Now, this diamond company, it's called LLD Diamonds, and it's a real company. Yeah. So there was an internet presence. Simon showed her some of, their work. She also was able to look at the website herself, and it was pretty impressive.
Was he on the website, though?
He was not on the website.
Okay.
Just his father. And there were tons of media articles about his father. And, again, he was a billionaire.
A successful business. Okay.
He was a top-notch guy. And she found this all to be very impressive. And she was really flattered and excited when he invited her to join him on a private jet to head to Bulgaria that very afternoon.
It's so funny because, it's so exciting, but the only thing I would be thinking is he's going to murder me.
Well, I was going to say a quick PSA. Don't get on a plane with a stranger you just met on the internet. We always say don't get in a car with a stranger. Yeah. Don't maybe go home with a stranger. But I feel like getting on a plane to take an international trip.
No.
But in her defense, she was young. She was excited. She was like, you only live once. Let's do this. So I don't fault her. I mean, some people have that adventurous attitude. And I think that's pretty cool. And, she says in hindsight, it probably wasn't the smartest decision, as far as safety goes. And some of her friends were a little apprehensive. But again, she was young and she was just living in the moment.
It's exciting, once in a lifetime.
That's exactly how she describes it.
Yeah.
And she was surprised to find that she was not the only person on the flight.
Oh.
So she met quite an entourage. So
that's right.
Simon's bodyguard was there. This is a man named Peter. There were also a few business associates. And most interestingly, I think, was Simon's ex-wife and their toddler daughter.
Yes.
Now, the thing that's not clear even to this day is who were these people? Was this woman really his ex-wife? Were these people some sort of business associates, or were they criminal associates? In other words, are they all involved in some sort of scam together? You might say, why am I spoiling it? But everyone knows where this is headed. So I think it's okay to say that.
Was it his daughter? Are we going to get there later? Did he have a daughter?
Well, that's the thing. I can't find anything. I mean, this little child, acted as if it was her father.
Okay.
So it's very possible. Yeah. Or again, this could have all, it's so hard to know what's truth and what's fiction. So who knows? Anyway, despite being surprised by the amount of people on board, the company made her feel even more safe. Because again, she was a little apprehensive. This is a stranger. But now not only are there other people around, there's a child around. This ex-wife who was being very welcoming, would talk to Cecilie about how much of a wonderful father Simon was. And everyone was kind of singing his praises. And Simon was very sweet to her. She says the plane ride, he was very affectionate, but very respectful. He really put her at ease. She felt like she was in good hands with him. And she was becoming pretty smitten with this Prince of Diamonds. The two spent the night together in Bulgaria at a very fancy hotel, and then Simon booked her a flight back to London for early the next day. And that's because he had to continue on his, his business excursions. And, she had to get back to her life as well. And she wasn't sure what to make of this. She didn't know if this was just a little fling, a little excitement, but it was not just a one-night experience. The two kept up a long-distance relationship. And, Simon was very busy with work because, as he says, he's a very important person in the diamond industry. He's traveling all over the world, but over the next few months, he would send her lavish gifts. They would FaceTime very often talking about their future together. He would come visit her. Anytime he was in Europe, she would go stay with him at his Amsterdam apartment. But they would meet up as often as possible. Now, she was falling fast and hard.
Right.
But dating the son of a diamond mogul did come at a bit of a price. As Simon began opening up more to Cecilie about his family, she learned that being at the top of the diamond world came with terrible danger. Simon often sent her articles about the family business and the many enemies who sent him death threats and wanted to take him down to get his fortune.
So take him down, or is his father just his family?
So a lot of the articles that he would send her were about, just threats, just talking about how the diamond industry was a little bit cutthroat. And there was some, I guess you could say, some feuds going on between different moguls in the industry. They never talked about Simon specifically, but I think the way Simon explained it was he was kind of like the man behind the scenes.
Okay.
His father was like the face of it, but he was doing like the on the ground work. He would show her death threats of, people that would like send him things, people that wanted to, if he was not in the picture, then they could take his business. And we're talking about billion-dollar business.
Right.
I mean, one night he even sent her a WhatsApp message saying Peter's hurt. And I don't know if you recall this from the documentary, but he even sent a picture of his bodyguard covered in blood with the two of them in the back of an ambulance.
Yes, I remember that. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah. So, this man was clearly injured. They were in an ambulance. Simon had blood on his shirt. So this situation was actually happening, but why or how, that's not clear. But he told her that it's because, someone was on their tail trying to kill them, essentially. He told her because of this, he could not use his credit cards to book anything under his name.
Oh, that's what it was. I was like, what was the point of this again? Okay.
Yeah. So he was saying it's simply becoming too easy for his enemies to trace him, and he needed a more obscure way to stay under the radar.
Right.
So this is when things start shifting, because now he says, can I please use your credit card?
Right.
And for her, this was a no-brainer because he had been so generous with her.
Yeah.
There was no worry at all for her that she wouldn't get her money back. He was a billionaire after all. And this was a man that she was falling in love with. And she was worried about his well-being. And if it meant lending him some money to keep him safe, she was very willing to do that.
It's so smart the way some of these fraudsters really lay the foundation of like establishing, I have a lot of money. You know what I mean? It's like, it's brilliant.
It's so strategic.
Yeah. I was listening to another podcast where I heard this type of fraud as well perpetrated. And it was so interesting that the perpetrator spent about $100,000 up front because he was betting, and he was right, that the payoff was going to be $500,000.
Yeah, it's an investment.
Right. It's an investment. Right.
So things start crumbling, or I guess we could say things start seeming shady. So every time he tried to send her money to cover the debts that she was racking up, something always seemed to go wrong. There was an issue with the transfer. There was an issue with the bank. But the mistakes always seemed to have a feasible explanation. So they weren't red flags at this point. And unfortunately, she continued sending him money. And eventually, he was using several credit cards in her name.
Oh, yeah.
Often calling her, begging her to call up the banks to increase the credit limit. He had tried to himself, but he couldn't because he clearly, I guess, besides the fact that he had the voice of a male and she's a female, he probably didn't know like a lot of the identifying information. So he would ask her and she would do that for him. Meanwhile, she's going deeper and deeper into debt. But, for him, as he says, it was a matter of life or death. He needed him and his team to be safe. And to be safe, they needed plane tickets and they needed cash because that's the only way they could stay on the move.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, he would send her panicked voice notes. You can hear these in the documentary. He would call her frantically sometimes in the middle of the night. Anytime she says that she felt even a little hesitation, it was overcome by her care and her worry for him. After a few weeks, however, and after not receiving any money at all from Simon, banks and collection agencies were now starting to contact Cecilie. And she said she was scared, and she called him and she said, she's run out of options to help him. She's scared for his safety, and now she's scared for her financial well-being as well. So rather than being empathetic whenever she would call him upset, he would actually start getting angry at her and almost like was gaslighting her, like that she was being selfish, being angry when he was the one who was in danger. And by this point, a lot of things just weren't adding up. So she's starting to suspect that Simon was possibly scamming her.
Oh.
So she placed a call to American Express. And within just hours after that phone call, investigators showed up at her house. Because she was right. Simon was scamming her. And in reality, there was no such person as Simon Leviev. What was discovered would shock not just Cecilie, but several other women as well. Because guess what? She was not the first person that the Prince of Diamonds had conned.
Right. There was, oh gosh, so many victims.
And usually this is what happens. It takes one to kind of make the house of cards fall down, but there are usually several people.
Right.
So who was Simon? Well, Simon was really a career criminal named Shimon Hayut, and he was known to authorities around the world. He had been jailed briefly in 2015 in Finland, and this was for defrauding 3 Finnish women. It doesn't seem like these charges stuck. I couldn't find out why. I don't know if there was not enough evidence to move forward, or maybe there was an issue with victim cooperation, but it seems like he slipped through being held criminally responsible at this time. Now, what we do know is that he was never in one place long enough, and he knew exactly how the system operated, and I bet you he knew that there were jurisdictional issues.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It almost reminds me of like Catch Me If You Can. Have you ever seen that movie? Or you know the story? Like he was it was almost like cat and mouse. He was continuously booking flights and hotel rooms. He was getting VIP tables using different people's credit cards. So basically he would take from one person to wow a different person. So he was able to take Cecilie on a private jet with money he took from other women.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
Yes, that's 100% what it is. And money he was getting from Cecilie, he was using to charm other women.
Right.
It's unbelievable the way. I don't even know how he kept this all straight, because these women all talk about how he knew what to ask them. He kept all their life straight. He was so caring and so considerate. He was always concerned for their well-being, following up about things going on in their lives. He must have kept like a roster of this stuff.
I mean, this is his career, so he probably studied it the way we study criminology or criminal justice, and the way we, you know what I mean? Like, this is his career.
You're absolutely right. Unfortunately, he was never held accountable for what he did to Cecilie. But he was convicted on 4 charges of fraud in 2019. Now, this was not at all related to her case, but because of these charges, he was sentenced to 15 months in prison. Unfortunately, he was released after serving only 5 months in prison.
Why wasn't he held responsible for Cecilie? Is it because she technically gave him the money or gave him permission? Or is there another reason?
It's such a good question, and that's something we'll talk about. The issue with these types of cases is it becomes a civil issue, not a criminal issue, because of the lack of evidence.
Huh. Okay.
Because she willingly gave the money.
Right.
So unfortunately, although it seems clearly criminal because it's fraud, she willingly gave the money. It's not that he took the money from her, but he was being deceptive. So I don't fully understand how it doesn't cross that, threshold. She did talk to a lot of people in the criminal justice system, and the way she explains it is she eventually just had to go to the civil. Like civil was more of the avenue that she was pursuing.
To recoup the money.
The money, yeah.
Is this like do you think this is like some of the cases that we've covered with, like I've covered catfishing cases? It's like fraud by catfishing, but catfishing is not exactly a crime yet, posing as someone else.
Well, that's the thing. If you think about it, because he was using someone else's credit cards, but he had her permission to do so.
Right, yeah.
Right? So like
she was giving him the money.
It makes it really tricky because he was using it exactly for what he said he was. Like if he said to her, can I borrow money because my mother's sick in the hospital, I have to pay bills, and then he got a private jet, maybe we could look at it as fraud, but maybe the fact that he was doing exactly what he said he was doing with the money.
That's probably exactly it. I think you probably nailed it on, yeah. He
Because
used the
said
money for what he said he was using.
He
That's
said he
not
was
fraud.
using it for hotels and planes.
Yeah.
He said it was for his safety, but it was to take women out.
It's actually brilliant if you think about it, unfortunately.
It's unbelievable. But all told, some reports, it's unclear exactly how much he swindled, but most reports say that he swindled his victims out of over, I'd say, $10 million overall.
Oh, my gosh.
But obviously the damage wasn't just financial for these women. It was deeply personal.
Yeah.
I mean, for Cecilie, she had fallen in love with this man. And she said, having to tell her family and friends what happened was very embarrassing for her. And she was dealing with heartbreak while still dealing with banks and institutions. It was over 185,000 pounds, which is more than 250,000 in US dollars. We're talking more than 250,000.
This is financial ruin.
It's financial ruin. While dealing with heartbreak and while dealing with, shame, she shouldn't, she did nothing wrong, but it was deeply shameful for her. In fact, so much so that she left London to go back to live with her family in Norway while she sorted this all out.
Right.
And really sadly, instead of being met with support, she was met with shame and victim blaming, not from her family and friends, but from the public, because people said she was a gold digger and that she should have never went on that initial flight with him.
Unbelievable. Wow. No sympathy for this, huh?
Luckily, once her story became well known, there was more sympathy. But I think when it was like more of a localized story, people were judging her. I think the fact that people called her a gold digger is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Again, like, who are people to judge that she wanted to go on this flight? Like, that's no one's business. She's clearly a victim here, and that's how she should be treated. But after the 2022 Netflix documentary, The Tinder Swindler, that's when her story became well known internationally. And I think that's where we saw a little more sympathy for her. Because it wasn't just her. If you recall in this documentary, she was one of 3 women who participated. There was also a woman named Pernilla and a woman named Aileen. And they also spoke about their experiences with Simon, or should I say Shimon, depending.
One of them, was it Cecilie that was looking for a house too to be living with him? Because I remember from the documentary, one of them was, they were supposed to be moving in together.
Yep. They were, yes. And she would FaceTime him to show him the apartments.
Yes.
And yes.
Oh, my gosh.
And she was looking at very expensive places because he had a lot of money. Now, the woman Pernilla ended up not being, so they met on an app as well. They met on Tinder, but they ended up just becoming very good friends. But she also gave him money because she was helping a friend out. Right. And then there was another woman who gave him money that was romantically involved with him. Right. But again, Cecilie's story was, I guess you could say, the main story in the Tinder Swindler. I don't know if you recall, but the third woman who talked, I believe it was Aileen, she had sold all of his designer clothes. Do you remember? She was so she realized she was being scammed, but she was still playing along with him. And he was saying he needed money. And she said, how about you give me your clothes and I'll sell it on eBay? Because he had very top designer clothes. So she made thousands and thousands of dollars selling his clothes on eBay, but she never gave him the money. He would call her flipping out, where's my money? And she would just laugh. And she's like, no, you're never seeing any of that money.
Well, I'm really glad she recouped some of her money.
Yeah, she did. So in the documentary, you could see her. She's a pretty badass. I mean, all of these women are unbelievable because they didn't just sit around and let this happen.
Yeah. Actually,
Cecilie, she teamed up with another one of Simon's victims, and they wrote a book together. I don't know if you've read it.
No.
I believe it was her and Pernilla. It's called Swindled Never After, which is such a cute title.
That's such a
It says
good title.
How We Survived and You Could Spot a Relationship Scammer. Now, I didn't read the book yet, but in the book, they go into detail about how people can reduce their risk of what's known as romance fraud. Have you heard of this?
Not the term, but that's so cool that they wrote a book to help other people.
Yeah. And romance fraud is kind of this newer, how we always talk about in our classes, as we get new technology, we get new crime types, like catfishing, obviously was not always a thing. Romance fraud is this new class of crimes that is pretty much people that meet people online and steal money from them and, love bomb them and then get them to give them money. Now, Cecilie is also now an advocate for victims of romance scams. So she does a lot of speaking at different events, different podcasts, many interviews. You can see them online. I listened to a few podcasts. She says that she told her story. She says that after she told her story in the Tinder Swindler, she received tons of messages from other women who had been scammed just like her. Yeah. And she said that's when she realized she wasn't alone and this was a widespread issue.
Yeah.
And as she told Cosmopolitan UK in September of 2025, quote, "There are so many long-term consequences to romance fraud that people aren't always immediately aware of. You have the mental health aspect, the lack of support, and the heavy burden of self-blame. You lose your confidence as well as your trust in yourself and your instincts. You ask, am I worthy of love again? You're battling all of these things on the top of financial destruction."
I think that people are hard. It's hard for people to see if you're not the victim of a direct violent crime. There's not physical injury. It's hard to see how catastrophic crimes against a person can be. And I think that illustrates the point.
And she's doing a lot now. I'm going to talk. She has an organization, which I'll talk about in a moment. But before that, I want to talk about her new Netflix docuseries. Have you heard of Love, Con, Revenge?
That's hers?
She's one of the hosts of it.
I didn't know. I haven't watched it yet, but yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's like one of the top shows that pops up.
Wow.
So let me tell you a little bit about it because I watched an episode last night and I was like blown away.
I'm so excited that you're finally in this documentary world with us.
So in the show, she partners with a private investigator, a woman named Brianne Joseph, to, quote, expose romance scammers and help victims reclaim control one takedown at a time.
Oh, that's so cool.
So it almost reminds me of like How to Catch a Predator on a much smaller level. So basically people contact Cecilie about these situations that they're in, that they are not able to get any help from law enforcement because, again, it falls into this gray area of it being a civil issue. So in the episode that I watched, there's a different story each episode. And in the episode I watched, a woman met a man on an app. I believe they were in their 50s. And she was just smitten with him. A very handsome man. He owned like a wellness center. The two were, he wined and dined her. She said she felt like a teenager again. And they, very, very fast after meeting, they became a couple. Soon after, he asked her if he could borrow $1,000 because he was, starting this wellness center. And she had been to the wellness center. They were in it together. She would help him do manicure the flowers in the front. He was going to be opening up this mental health facility. And she struggled with mental health issues. So she felt like she could relate to him really well. So she said she didn't think twice about lending him the $1,000. And get this, he paid her back, giving her an additional $500 as a thank you.
Yeah.
Now, this is so strategic because he is building trust. He is showing her, like, I'm going to pay you back and I'm giving you interest. He would take her to get her nails done. They would go out to lavish dinners. And then it all started crumbling. They were together, I believe, for about a year. And she was, I forget exactly how much, but it was thousands upon thousands of dollars. He even borrowed money from like her 17-year-old daughter. She drained her retirement account. And then he just disappeared.
And this was all under the guise of the wellness center that needed money for that, I assume.
Exactly. I did not finish the episode, so I can't tell you how it ends. But this is a good plug. So when I stopped watching, they were using the PI skills to track this man down.
Okay.
And the last thing I saw is they found him and they were following him in the car. So I left it like I'm obviously going to finish it tonight.
I'm obviously going to watch it tonight now too.
So I would not be surprised if we cover some other cases from this docuseries because it's super interesting. And again, I find it really interesting because it is like not a criminal issue fully, but it clearly is a criminal issue. But again, there's a burden of proof. We can't, just because something seems criminal, that doesn't mean it can be prosecuted. If there's not enough evidence, if it doesn't reach that bar that a prosecutor has enough evidence to charge someone, it's not a crime. And then you're stuck with victims who have to pick up the pieces.
If the law hasn't caught up with technology either, this is one of those areas. And these kind of con artists really benefit from that.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, Cecilie also has an organization. So she teamed up with fellow scam victim Anna Rowe, and they set up something called Love Said. So this is a think tank that is centered on fighting what is known as romance fraud. When we talk about action items, I'm going to give you a little more information on where you can find that organization and look into more of what they're doing. But let's talk about Simon, or again, should I say Shimon?
Shimon. Where's Shimon from?
Israel.
French. Oh, Israel. That's right.
Yep.
Okay.
In 2002, so I'll tell you where he is now, but first I'll tell you a little bit about where he's been in the last couple of years. In 2022, he did an interview with the U.S. TV show Inside Edition. You know that show, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he denied conning any of the women. And he says that he was a legitimate businessman who got rich through investing in Bitcoin.
Oh, get out. Oh, yeah. He's got to keep up his con. There he goes.
Yep.
You know who that reminds me of? It reminds me of Anna Delvey.
I was thinking of Anna Delvey, and I almost watched that documentary last night. Or it's a movie now on Netflix. I forget. I think, what's it, Becoming Anna it's called? Or Inventing Anna?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. You know, she's been on my list since we started the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. I might have to pick that one back up. In late September of 2025, it was reported that Shimon was arrested at Batumi International Airport in Georgia, the country, not the state.
Okay.
As of this recording, and as far as I could find, he is currently detained in Georgia. Now, a Georgian court ruled that he may be held for up to 3 months while extradition proceedings take place. So Germany is mentioned as the country that is requesting his extradition for fraud charges in Berlin.
Well, of course, there it is.
So between 2017 and 2019, he allegedly convinced a woman to cover his phone, credit card, and travel expenses, in which he racked up nearly $52,000 and broke promises to pay her back. So he has a clear MO. And
they're treating it as a fraud. That's interesting.
So, yeah. So, again, I don't know. It has to do with maybe the burden of proof in different countries or the evidence available. But, it sounds like they may have a case there.
My goodness.
Okay. Now, did the system get it right? Some theories, our favorite part. I mean, I think in order to discuss theories, we have to first have an idea about who Simon, a.k.a. Shimon Yehud, is. From what I could find, he was born in 1990 in Israel, and that's where he grew up. His father was a rabbi, and from what I understand, he was estranged from his mother.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up in poverty. He didn't have much money, and the family struggled financially.
Okay.
As a teenager, he reportedly committed some small-scale frauds, such as forgery and theft. For example, I read that he had stolen some checkbooks while babysitting, and also while working as a handyman. And he was also accused of check fraud. Then, around age 15, he moved to Brooklyn, New York to stay with family friends. Apparently, he got in trouble shortly after for using credit cards without authorization. And I don't know if that was family friend credit cards or others, but that's really all I could find about him. But I think we could speculate based on what we know about people who commit these types of crimes. I think one of the most relevant theories to explain these type of offenders is rational choice theory. Because as we saw, crimes like these involve planning, manipulation, and risk assessment. Like, it's very clear that Shimon carefully chose his victims. He was looking for people who were emotionally invested in him and financially stable.
Yeah.
But there's some other ones. I think there's actually a lot. I think one of our favorites that we talk about a lot would be neutralization theory. I think it's clear that he justified his behavior by denying injury. You know, think of him saying, they gave me the money voluntarily, so I didn't do anything wrong. Denying responsibility, maybe saying, it's part of the dating game, what's happening here. Or maybe even appealing to higher loyalties. I needed this to maintain my identity, to continue living as who I said I was.
You also said that he was born in poverty, and it seems like his crimes were a response to possibly even blocked opportunities. So that would be strain theory. So it's possible that poverty, instead of, working his way out of it, he decided to innovate, as we say. That's strain theory.
I think it's very clear that his aspiration for wealth and status exceeded his legitimate means. So he had to resort to innovative deviance, right? Yeah. In other words, he had to find another way to achieve his societal goals through illegitimate methods. It's like a perfect example of enemy theory.
Yeah.
I also think you could see a little bit of routine activities theory. I mean, we have a motivated offender. He's seeking money and status. Suitable targets, women who are looking for relationships, often trusting and emotionally vulnerable. And then you can think of lack of guardianship as maybe limited platform oversight. Like some of these apps, a lot of scammers, there's no oversight. And I don't know if I believe that the app should be responsible for oversight. Right. I'm not sure. Right. But there's also weak international fraud detection. There's victim reluctance to report these types of crimes.
He's a lifelong offender, too. He's studying his craft. He knows the loopholes. I wonder if, one thing I wish we knew about his background, I wonder if learning theory is involved. And I mean, I feel like, did he learn initially, like, how to fraud, how to do checks? Was there someone that
like maybe his father or someone else in his life?
Did someone teach him any of these tricks starting young? Because he started young and he seemed to know what he was doing. So I wonder if there was someone that socialized this with him.
I absolutely think there's socialization here. Also, it occurred to me differential reinforcement theory because he seems to keep getting away with it.
Yes.
So differential reinforcement theory talks about how when people are rewarded for their behavior, they're more likely to continue that behavior. Also, with learning theory, when you see other people rewarded for behavior. But I think for him, he was able to keep evading law enforcement. And he was able to keep doing this over, his early adulthood, his teenage years, adulthood years. So it was working for him. He was getting what he wanted out of it.
It might still. Let's see what happens with his charges now. If he doesn't wind up serving much time, he winds up getting out of this again. It's like, he probably thinks I could serve a couple months here and there, but it's worth it if you think about it.
Yeah, you're right. And, I think he's smart enough to know what evidence is needed to charge him with certain crimes. And everything he's doing, I think, is extremely instrumental.
Oh my gosh, women be warned. Just see his face and just stay away.
I know. I mean, I also think it's possible that he could have an impulse control disorder, some maybe narcissistic personality traits.
He's the perfect storm.
He really is. I mean, I would ask you if I'm missing anything here, but I think I might have hit on every theory.
Almost every theory there.
Almost every theory.
Yeah.
But again, I'm going to say rational choice is winning as far as what theory could explain the most.
Every single one, I think, does. But he's a career offender. That's for sure.
Yes. And I don't see him stopping anytime soon unless he is deterred by maybe a harsh punishment. But who knows?
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah. As I mentioned, Cecilie does a lot of advocacy work in the area of romance fraud. So if you're interested, check out her organization. Again, it's called Leviev. That's LOVESAID. And that's at lovesaid.org. Now, what they do there, they're considered a fraud center and a think tank, and they're dedicated to combating romance fraud. Their mission is to prevent fraud, support victims, and empower stakeholders working to improve outcomes in this space. Now, their website's really impressive. They provide education, advocacy, resources, and not just for victims, but also for law enforcement, financial institutions, and social media platforms. So it's looking at this problem holistically, and it's aiming to disrupt romance fraud practices and strengthen protective measures. It's pretty incredible.
This is so awesome. One of these positive things that comes out of such a bad crime. Do you know how many people this is going to help? I mean, this is such a great resource, and it's so cool to hear this. I'm so glad to hear it.
Yeah. And as I mentioned before, should also, if you're interested, check out the book that Cecilie wrote with Pernilla called Swindled Never After. You can get that, of course, on Amazon or anywhere else that you get your books. We have 2 questions today. Are you still with me enough to go for 2?
Yeah, I'm totally with you.
Do it. I know. Yeah. It feels like also, these cases that aren't violent crimes. Like, don't you just feel such a different energy by the end?
Yes. Yeah, I do.
I don't feel depressed. I mean, because also we ended on a high note. There's so much change happening.
I think that's why we ended on such a high note. I was so pleased to hear the outcome there.
Okay, so let's get to our questions. So the first one is from a supporter, and the question is, to what extent could baseline mental health screening in schools help identify early signs of mental health issues and abuse? And might such screening reduce rates of self-harm and school-related violence?
Wow.
And they also mentioned, how can you do this without compromising student privacy and trust? Because that was going to be the point that I brought up. But our listeners are brilliant. And this question pretty much recognizes the fact that this would be a really great policy. However, we have to recognize that it would compromise privacy.
Right.
So how do you deal with this? Do you have an answer to this? Because I'm not sure I do.
No, I think that the listener answered the question. It would actually help. Sorry, it would be preventive. But I guess the problem is also that you can't mandate this in school as well, right? So mandating and privacy are maybe the two issues I see with it. But certainly, I think it's, I don't know what to say. It's a good idea. And yes, I do think it would be helpful. But I don't see how it would be required.
But this goes back to that constant struggle in the criminal justice system between personal liberties and public safety. You know, you saw it after 9/11. You saw it during COVID, right? People didn't want to wear a mask because our personal liberties are protected by the Constitution. But then you have to weigh that against public safety. Same with after 9/11, like searching people's bags on the subway or profiling. So I think this is the issue we always see when we're trying to enact any sort of policies in our criminal justice system. You want to keep the public safe. Everyone would agree that we want to reduce rates of self-harm and school-related violence, such as mass shootings.
Yeah, of course.
But on the flip side, we have to recognize that we also have constitutional rights. We have rights to privacy, and we have to honor those as well.
Early prevention or identification of risk factors is definitely something that is ignored in the conversation on school violence. Everyone always talks about the aftermath and gun control and protecting schools. So I think early prevention and red flags are great. And I do think there's a way to probably do it without requiring a full mental health scan. But I'm not sure yet what that is.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. I think we can meet in the middle somewhere.
yeah.
That's such a great question.
Brilliant.
And I really wish I had a better answer for it. But it's great food for thought. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So one more from a supporter. We got a lot of good questions lately. I have a bunch in my back pocket for future episodes. But okay. We have a question from one of our international supporters.
Yay.
This person says that they are interested in criminology and psychology. However, criminology studies and careers aren't really a thing where they live. So they're worried about limited career options after going to undergrad and even graduate school. Okay. So they're asking, what are some career options after studying criminology and psychology? I will start with this one, and then if you want to add anything. I think a common misconception is that people feel that whatever they major in, they have to work in that exact discipline. Now, when we get to graduate school, I think that matters more. Now, what I mean by that is if you get an undergraduate degree in psychology, criminology, sociology, anthropology, political science, any of those social science degrees, you could work in a mental health facility, you could work in probation and parole, you could work in a juvenile facility, you can still work in the criminal justice field, right? I think when you get to graduate school, that's when it's more important to focus in on what you're interested in, because then, but even then, for example, if you get a master's in forensic psychology, you could still work in a field that is not exactly psychology. It's maybe more criminology or vice versa. Every single business has a job for criminologists. I don't think people realize that. For example, you have loss prevention.
Yeah.
You have fraud. So a lot of people, when a lot of people think of like criminology, they're like, oh, I have to work in law enforcement. I have to work in a court. I have to work in a prison. No, you can work at a bank. You can work at a consulting firm. There's so many options because criminology and psychology are much broader than people realize, I think.
Beautiful answer. Brilliant.
Oh, stop. Thank you.
No, it was. Yeah, it was brilliant.
No, do you have anything to add?
I would just add that if you're interested, probably, I don't know specifically where this person is, but every governmental agency also has wings of investigation.
Yes.
So if you're interested in just maybe investigation, but you don't want to do it like for the police, you can find so many investigative type positions also working for the government or in the private sector, like Amy said.
That's a great point. Yep. All right. Thank you for those thoughtful questions. And as always, if you have a question for us, feel free to message us at womenandcrimepodcast.com/contact. If you want your question to be guaranteed to be read on air, then you can join us on Patreon at the Lifer tier. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today, and we will catch you next time on Women and Crime.
Women in Crime is written and hosted by Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. Our producer is James Varga. Script editing is by Abigail Belcastro. Audio editing is by Siler Burr and Jose Alfonso. And music is by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, please remember to follow and leave a review. You can also support the show through Patreon, where you can get access to additional ad-free content such as exclusive full-length episodes, lectures, a book club, and virtual happy hours with Meghan and Amy. For more information, visit patreon.com/womenandcrime.
Sources for today's episode include CecilieFjellhoy.com, The Stylist, Cosmopolitan, the Tinder Swindler documentary on Netflix, People.com, BBC, IMDB, and OCCRP.org.